Sitting back on the road, back on the road, and back on the road, back on the road, steady as I go.
Hi folks, so thank you for stopping by. If you would like to learn how to build a camper van like this yourself, then please check out my other YouTube videos. So if you guys have found these videos helpful, you can help me out in a big way by picking up a copy of my first ever album that my brother and I recorded in Nashville late last year. Any proceeds will go to future recording projects, as well as taking the band on tour and hopefully promoting it. I'll leave a link in the description and talk a little bit more about it at the end of this video. Cool, so our next step is to put the insulation in, so we're going to be putting some insulation boards. These are 25mm thick, because they were the thickest I could fit in behind the battens and everything. We're just going to measure these different open areas here, and then take our measurements onto the boards themselves and just mark them out with a felt tip. Then we're just going to take a saw like this one's quite fine, the teeth on here, and then just make the cuts and put them into place. Make sure when you're using this stuff that you're wearing gloves, because it does make your fingers a bit itchy, and you've also got a decent respirator. You can get some disposable ones. I'm just trying to find mine. I've got one of these, but make sure you're wearing something so that you're not inhaling all the dust and insulation that comes off it. Cool, so now we're just going to take our piece, we're going to put it into the area we want to fit it and just check that it will actually stay in place. Cool, I'm going to use some of this now, some 3M craft mount adhesive, and I'm just going to spray this over the top of my insulation, giving it a pretty decent amount of coverage, and then I'm going to whack it up there. So these are the insulation fixings that I'd really recommend using instead. And they come under a few different names. It could be self-adhesive insulation fixings, or stick pins, or insulation hangers. So do a few different searches, just make sure it is definitely self-adhesive. Whatever you're going to be attaching this to, be the wall of the van or the ceiling of your van, just make sure that it's really clean and that it's dry so that these will adhere properly. Then what you do is just take off this sticky part here and just adhere it to the van. Now I'd recommend putting about 4, one in each corner of your insulation board. You're basically going to push the insulation board over the pin bit here, and then once that's on you can put a cap over the top to stop it from coming away from the pin itself. It's got really good adhesion properties to it, so it's not going to come off when the van's rattling around in transit, and it's a whole lot easier than what I'm about to show you, where I'm using several pieces of wood and everything to try and hold all the insulation up. So for these pieces on the roof, I actually cut it down the middle just to help it curve better with the roof. I've used 2 scrap pieces of wood to hold it in place while it dries off and gets nice and tacky. I'm now going to do this side panel, and it's worth noting that if you've got any ridges like this, you want to cut the insulation within these ridges, otherwise your insulation board is not going to fit flush with the side here. So don't forget, later on we're going to fill all of those little areas with some spray foam insulation. So while I'm waiting for this all to dry and tack up nicely, I'm going to start doing a bit of spray foam insulation. We're going to use this in some of the gaps, go around these areas here and into all the little crevices that we can't actually fit any insulation into, so we can poke it into these holes, for example, and fill those with insulation. So it's simply just a case of shaking this up and then screwing it onto the gun, and yeah, then you just apply it with the gun. So there's our spray gun with the expanding foam mounted on the top. So if you want to change how much is coming out, if you turn it in clockwise, you'll get a very small amount of expanding foam coming out. If you move this anti-clockwise, you'll get a lot more. So just find what you're happy with, and then you want to spray in all the areas. Around the edges of the insulation is good. This will also help it hold in place, and you want to get it into all the little cavities where you can't get these insulation boards inside. So don't forget when you're using this that this will expand, so it might be worth doing it in layers and just seeing how you go. It's alive. Cool, so all my insulation is in, as you can see. Gone to town with the spray foam insulation. Just as a guide, I used about 6 bottles of this stuff, and they're 750ml each. So just for my little van, that's a fair bit, but I have used a lot of it, so you may not use quite as much as me. But just a few things I was going to point out. You should ideally insulate your floor as well. I haven't done because I've got limited headspace here in my van because it's so small. But when you do that, just run some battens across the van and screw those into the chassis of the van, and then just fit those insulation boards into those spaces that are left. Also, another thing to do with doors, you might find you've got some weird shapes here that you need to fit insulation into, so just cut them up into smaller pieces and push them through. That's totally fine to do that, and then fill it with the expanding foam. Make sure that you leave your mechanisms free so that your lock will still work. Make sure that if you've got any wires here that they're not being covered by the insulation as well, and also make sure you insulate the front cab of your van as well. You will get a lot of heat coming through there as well, of course, because it is the roof. So you know, the importance of insulation is the fact that it slows down the transfer of heat. So if it's, you know, boiling hot outside and the sun's beating down, it's going to slow down that heat getting into your van, overheating your van. Similarly, if it's cold outside, and you know you've put the heater on and it's going to be warm inside, it will slow down the heat transferring out of the van and you getting colder in the van. So it's really important that you insulate every part possible. Last thing I'm going to show you to do with the spray foam insulation is how to clean out your gun. So you just unscrew the expanding foam canister from the gun. You might get some excess coming out, it's totally fine. Then you want to get some foam gun cleaner. This is the one I got from Screwfix here in the UK, and to begin with you can just put this tab on the top and just spray around the areas where there has been any of the expanding foam. Once you've done that, you can then screw the can on top and just spray it a few times. Just leave that to soak for a little while and then come back and take the can off. Lastly, don't worry if you've got any excess expanding foam coming out, we can tidy that all up later. It will come off quite easily, and it does actually say that you can sand this stuff, so we can crack on with that tomorrow, and I'm going to let it all set now. Cool, so just before I wrap it in the full insulation, I've just gone round to these edges of the spray foam and I've just trimmed any excess spray foam off so that the cladding can all sit flush later on. So we're going to do the full insulation wrap next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the length of the floor here, and then I'm going to cut it to size. I'm going to do the same for the walls and the ceilings. It would be great to get it all in one big piece actually, if possible, but it's quite awkward to work with when you're trying to push it all up. So what I might do is cut it into different sections for the walls, the ceilings, the floor, and then we'll just seal those with some full insulation tape to make sure moisture doesn't get through. So two things I'm going to mention. One is that I'm adhering the insulation with some double-sided tape, and then I'm finishing off some of the edges with this full insulation tape here. And also you might want to cut some holes to allow your wiring to come through. Also I've cut a hole here for this light to make its way through, same here on the top.
Cool. So just to reiterate then, what you want to do is go to your panel, take some measurements with a tape measure, and take that to your foil insulation wrap. Cut it out with a pair of scissors, and then just check that it does fit the right size of the panel. Stick it on with some double-sided sticky tape, then go around all the edges afterwards once it's stuck on with some foil insulation tape just to secure it and make sure no moisture is going to get through. Make sure you don't go too far out, because later on when you put your cladding on, it might show past your cladding or your plywood, walls, whatever you're going to be using. So just try and tuck it in nicely, but make sure that no moisture is going to get through. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Please like and subscribe and check out our other content on all things camper. As I mentioned before, I've just recorded my first album and need all the help I can get. So I'll leave you with an album preview for now, and a link in the description if you'd like to pick up a copy.
She does all that she can. Yes, anymore. I'm heading west, yeah, till I cross that line. $6 short, but my soul is clean. I need one more dime. The fruit machine swirling waves on me. Yeah. You put their cold and harsh demeanor, it'll soon come back around. So don't let the bastards get